In the 1960s, there was a park that was the go-to place in Atlanta for amusement, thrills, and entertainment. A place that was there before the likes of Six Flags Over Georgia, that would be highly advertised as a place for fun for all the families. Well, unfortunately, not all families, as this park would become a huge talking point in the civil rights movement for equality. Atlanta dabbled in different forms of leisure, with that including amusement parks. In 1840, Walton Springs, which was considered Atlanta's first amusement park, was opened for operation. In the late 1800s, private-owned amusement parks began to be erected and take off, doing well in country towns. But in major cities during this time, such as Atlanta for example, was not what we know it as today. These major cities were dirty, people were getting ill and dying from what would nowadays be treatable diseases. Therefore, a plan was put in motion to provide families with an escape of the harsh realities of what was occurring in life and to have fun. Aside from the idea of going hiking and breathing fresh air as a way for individuals to have fun and escape reality to clear their minds, a push for more amusement parks to be built was included in the plan to provide an escape. During this time in the 1890s, African Americans' migration to Atlanta was at an all-time high. Therefore, with the new initiative of escapism, there would arise a huge influx of white-only amusement parks in Atlanta. In comes White City in 1907 to also rival Ponce de Leon Amusement Park, but White City would open to a crowd of nearly 20,000 people. 14 years later, a black-only amusement park by the name of Joyland Park would be created. As the years and decades went by, quite a few amusement parks would be built as amusement parks began to massively rise to popularity and be built all over the country. But in Atlanta in the 1960s, in would come an amusement park in Southwest Atlanta that no other amusement park was better than, more popular than, and had a larger marketing and advertising budget than FunTown. FunTown hosted a pre-opening for workers and contractors who were involved in building the park. Ed Norris of Locust Grove, Georgia, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in his reflection that it seemed that FunTown had a pre-opening event for workers and others involved with making FunTown possible, which our family attended. I believe I was 13 or 14 years old. But FunTown opened officially to the public on Memorial Day weekend of 1961 on Saturday, May 27th. This park would cost $2.5 million, which in 2024 would be equivalent to over $20.5 million. This park was designed with local residents in mind to be able to come and experience enjoyment. They advertised for this park that FunTown was just as it sounded, a fun town, that guests, when they visited the park, would be moving in to FunTown. The park would open with 200 attendants dressed in Confederate uniforms to act as Confederate troops to carry out the Civil War Centennial theme. FunTown would be a free admission park, with that including free parking and a lot that could host 2,000 cars. In trying to get the word out in the street that FunTown was now open and to get people to the park, a massive advertisement push began on TV commercials and also across newspapers. Advertisements of the likes of grocery store ads for discounted ride tickets if they use a Kroger coupon, and even other promotions that boys and girls would only pay half-price rates on rides and that all teachers would be charged double. Huge marketing and promotion of products and food would be a big driving force for FunTown. FunTown would market that for $1 plus the purchase of a twin-pack bag of Gordon's Crunchy Potato Chips would get you a $2 book of tickets for rides at the park, as FunTown would operate as a free admission, pay-per-ride system.
Now watch closely. This is the Bobaloop, America's newest game sensation. Hi, I'm Nancy Rogers in Baltimore, Maryland, the home of the Bobaloop. We'd like to show you some of the tricks of coordination and timing that you can learn to do with a Bobaloop. This is called fishing, one of the easier of the Bobaloop tricks. Mom's doing one a little more difficult. It's called orbit. Brother likes it too, even when it's a tough one like ring. Bobalooping is fun for the whole family. You can have family contests, or you may even be the Bobaloop champion of your neighborhood. Be sure to get your Bobaloop now and start practicing right away.
And oh yeah, attempting to hop on the hottest craze at the time, FunTown would try to sway kids into coming to the park by using FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, by giving away free Babaloops with if they provided this coupon stating, "Be first in Atlanta with the newest fun fad," in which they would receive one once they left the park. Included in this fun town of a park would be many modes of transportation, with that including an actual steam train, a helicopter ride, and a water boat ride. During the opening years, some of the other rides would include a kiddie helicopter, Water Scamp, which was a water bumper boat ride, a Wild Mouse roller coaster manufactured by Myler called Wild Mouse, giant teacups, bumper cars, a tilt-a-whirl, a kiddie whip, a huge Ferris wheel, merry-go-round, and the Daily Flight to the Moon, which was a simulated rocket ship ride. This ride was quite interesting, especially for the time that it was. According to an advertisement in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that it was a simulated trip to the moon in a gleaming 70-foot rocket. The rocket had a capacity of 34 riders, and before the flight began, each space traveler would fasten their seatbelt. Then the rocket would lift off the ground by hydraulic lifts, and after that, blast off. The pilot turns on a large viewing screen located in the forward section of the cabin. A magnetic tape is turned on simultaneously with the viewer, and a voice explains an actual spaceflight as pictures of the rocket progress from Earth to the moon are flashed on the screen. The entire simulated spaceflight was based on scientific fact and was designed to be educational as well as a highly entertaining adventure. Along with all of these rides, there was a large batting cage where guests would go up against a uniformed mechanical pitcher. The park also had two 19-hole mini golf courses, an arcade that was deemed as being the largest in the southern United States, and last but not least, next to the park was the Atlanta Bowling Center, a huge 72-lane bowling center that was open 24 hours. In order to add more action to the park and to bring in more people to actually show up to the park, FunTown would often host a huge array of competitions, concerts, and events. These extracurricular activities would range from a photo fair, which was essentially a beauty contest that included a fashion show, a health show, which was a World's Strongest Man competition, which featured the 1963 Mr. America title holder. There was a tea drinking and rock and roll contest. Sounds strange, right? Well, it is just that. A unique contest where Courtney Cookie Lane, who was the reigning Miss Disco Tea, stated that it's a way of expressing your individuality. The way young people dance today is so natural, so sincere, and it's the same way with tea. You can drink it hot or ice and mix it with anything you like. Yep, tea drinking and rock and roll contests were held at FunTown. These were just a few that I mentioned of quite a lot of quirky competitions, concerts, and events that took place at the park. Speaking of quirky, let me introduce you to Clyde Buddy Farnan was the general manager of FunTown, in which he began his tenure at FunTown in FunTown's 4th year of operation. Before his stint with FunTown, Buddy Farnan had leadership roles at other amusement parks such as Pleasure Island, which was approximately 15 miles north of Boston, and Freedomland USA, which was located in the Bronx, New York, and owned by the other not often mentioned creator of Disneyland, C.V. Wood. Farnan's true passion was magic. While at FunTown, he was also a big-time regional TV magician, in which he was the star of the Fun Time show on WSB-TV. Apart from being the general manager of FunTown, he also held a Magic Ganza, which was a daily magic show at the park, with multiple magicians performing tricks entertaining guests. With the addition of Buddy Farnan to FunTown as the general manager, he made an immediate impact. He raised the price to ride all of the rides to $1.75 and started charging 25 cents to those who didn't want to ride. Attendance once reached an all-time high of 10,000 people in the park on a single day of operation. But in his second season with the park, he helped double the records of attendance made in all of the years prior, dating back to the opening year. Although I've shined light on the fun aspects so far of this amusement park and its creation, that including the rides, weird, hilarious, awkward, and quite odd, quirky advertisements and features. But one thing was massively missing to make this amusement park as great and dominant as FunTown attempted to be in Atlanta, with all of their rides, attractions, huge advertisement budgets, and commercials. That being the lack of inclusivity of all mankind. Do keep in mind that this was the 1960s. The civil rights movement was in full force, which was an organized effort by Black Americans in the United States to abolish legalized racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement in this country. In the early 1960s, Birmingham, Alabama was the most racially divided city in the United States, And in 1963, as an effort to bring attention to the integration efforts of African Americans in Birmingham, therefore the Birmingham Campaign, a nonviolent direct action campaign, was launched by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was the president of the SCLC, to assist affiliate leader Fred Shuttlesworth's Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. After negotiations fell through, nonviolent direct action of sit-ins and marches became their course of action. A week later, on April 10, 1963, a judge granted city officials an injunction banning all anti-segregation protests in Birmingham. After nonviolent sit-ins, protests, and march attempts in defiance of the injunction, leaders of the SCLC decided to push forward and march. This landed Dr. King and more than 3,400 people arrested and put in Birmingham jails. In the midst of Dr. King's 8 days in jail, he wrote what would famously be known as the Letter from a Birmingham Jail. This letter was addressing 8 white religious clergymen who criticized his Birmingham campaign efforts. The moral of this eloquently written letter was that he believed that people had a responsibility to follow just laws and a duty to break unjust ones, that the goal of America, dating back to its foundation, has always been freedom. Within this letter from a Birmingham jail, he mentioned the struggle of explaining the racial injustice going on in the world to his daughter Yolanda by stating, "When you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to a public amusement park that has been advertised on television and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that FunTown is closed to colored children."
Like most children, she likes to look at television, and she was looking at television and they were advertising FunTown, and she ran downstairs and said, "Daddy, you know I've been telling you I want to go to FunTown, and they were just talking about FunTown on the television, and I want you to take me to FunTown." No, I stood there speechless. How could I explain to a little 6-year-old girl that she couldn't go to FunTown because she was colored?
This speech, among many other things, put a microscope on FunTown as a focal point in viewing the civil rights movement. After this letter, a few months later in mid-June of 1963, FunTown closed due to up to 10 black and white teens staged a desegregation attempt. Rather than admitting the teens, FunTown ended up closing the park for the rest of the day. So why did FunTown ended up closing for good? 4 crucial reasons which caused the downfall of FunTown. Buddy Farnan, former GM of FunTown, did an interview with magician Scott Wells on the Magic Word podcast in 2023 at 89 years old, where he shared some insight on the financial struggle of FunTown, although his addition as general manager brought in huge growth to the park during his tenure.
And in Atlanta, it was another amusement facility, amusement park, a theme park. It was called FunTown.
Okay.
And for 7 years, it was operated, but never made a dime.
As we discussed, FunTown was not integrated. Racial segregation hindered FunTown, and with Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail, really put a spotlight on the park, as FunTown would often promote on TV commercials that the park was meant for all members of their families to be able to come to the park and enjoy, although that didn't mean African Americans. Along with the aforementioned desegregation attempt by those 10 black and white teens, the name FunTown became a negative connotation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 would come into play, which prohibited discrimination of the basis of race, color, sex, and national origin. Buddy Farnan came to the park as general manager in 1964, the year the Civil Rights Act of '64 was signed. That according to him, he mentioned that he did have Dr. King and his family come to FunTown later on.
Oh, the reason that I went to Atlanta was to see that the amusement park was integrated. They were not integrated.
They were segregated. I mean, black and white. I mean, back then, back in the 60s, sure.
Yes.
Before civil rights and all that, yeah.
And the thing that was interesting was that Dr. King mentioned me in his first autobiography.
Really?
FunTown was now open.
For blacks to come in, and they were welcome.
Yes,
okay.
And his family, I had him there quite a few times.
So you knew him?
Yes.
You had met him?
And I still get calls every once in a while from Stanford University, writing something about Dr. King's world.
Yeah.
The last one was they were using his publications that he did from jail. I mean, it's, you start out, you're a magician.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're a cowboy.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, you're a radio guy and a television guy. And holy cow, you're involved in the
Civil rights orbit.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, out of all the things I've done, that's one of the things that I'm probably most proud of.
Most proud of, I would imagine so.
FunTown operated from 1961 to 1967, a huge player with even more financial backing, more rides, and a bigger name that was growing would move into town, taking over, and would amuse the theme park scene in Atlanta. Last but not least, the owners of FunTown would fire Buddy Farnan, and in need of getting their money back from another huge venture that they embarked on, they sold FunTown, then sold off all of their rides.
Was a company from Boston. It was an Irish last name, and I forget what it is. Anyway, they wanted to be on the stock market,
Okay.
and the only way to get there quickly was to buy a company that was on the stock market, and they did.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And they spent a lot of money, and the only way they could get their money back was to sell whatever they had. And
Sure.
one of the things they had was a bunch of amusement rides,
Oh, theme parks.
so they dumped them.
Wait, you said rides. So theme parks, or actually the rides in theme parks?
Rides. They closed the park, sold
Okay.
the rides.
That essentially put the final nail in the coffin in the demise of FunTown. 14 years later, in 1981, the shell of what was FunTown remained. As I was walking and driving by the side of land of FunTown, could see cracked pavement and could still see the FunTown Amusement Center entrance sign rusting away and the other leftover remnants of the park. FunTown became a part of a novel in 1998 entitled Midnight Clear by Mary Kay Andrews, who went by pen name Kathy Hogan Trocheck. She went on to state in the year 2000 in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution of her real-life discoveries that we found an amazing hobo jungle had sprung up among the ruins of the old park, and I wrote about it, of course with her referring to FunTown. According to an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 2002, 35 years after the closing of FunTown, it was reported that a homeless village consisting of dozens of huts still remained at the location of the defunct park, and that lighting was being generated by a 1985 Mercury Capri, just as Kelly Trocheck reported of her findings back in the late 90s. Although in 2002, there were still homeless camps residing on the property of the former FunTown Amusement Center, to attempt to increase the total size of a particular college campus, the site of land was actually purchased in 2001 by the Georgia school system and acquired to be a part of Atlanta Metropolitan College. The point of theme parks and amusement parks is for all walks of life to be able to enjoy and escape the harsh realities for a few hours. From kids experiencing their favorite attractions to adults having childlike fun, these parks bring so much joy to people, that including myself. I truly love the togetherness that it brings, and I love how a roller coaster doesn't see race when you're experiencing an inversion, nor does it discriminate how intense it can be. But never underestimate the power of love, equality, joy, and happiness a theme park can bring. Whether you're someone who visits a park once a season, or you're a theme park enthusiast who visits all the time, all are welcome through the turnstiles to experience the fun.